In the dim light of a fading autumn day, Harold Finch shuffled slowly along the narrow lane behind the derelict warehouse at the edge of town. Now in his 70s, Harold had long since resigned himself to a life of quiet solitude after the loss of the love of his life decades ago. His days were marked by a gentle melancholy, a routine of faded photographs, silent meals in a creaking apartment, and long walks through empty streets as if searching for something he could no longer name. His heart, battered by years of grief and isolation, seldom dared to hope again, and the world around him had grown muted in its color. That evening, as the wind whispered through the withered oak trees and a chill rain began to fall in rhythmic drizzles, Harold's path led him past a long-forgotten construction site. The site, cloaked in shadows and glistening with the sheen of evening rain, was usually quiet, a testament to a time when its purpose was lost under layers of neglect. But tonight, a piercing sound shattered the silence. It was a low, insistent bark echoing from behind an old, leaning storage shed. Harold stopped and leaned on his cane, his eyes narrowing as he squinted through the drizzle. There, beneath a flickering streetlight, stood a massive German shepherd, its coat matted, eyes alert with a mix of wild intensity and curious despair. The dog barked once, a note full of urgency and longing, as though beckoning Harold to come closer. With hesitant steps born of both caution and a sudden flicker of recognition, Harold made his way toward the sound. As he approached, the dog's barks grew more insistent, as if carrying an almost desperate command that stirred something deep in his soul. At first, the dog's demeanor was feral, its stance defensive, but there was also an unmistakable intelligence. In those amber eyes, a spark of loyalty and tenderness, hidden beneath a layer of bruised survival. Harold noted that the dog was not alone in its insistence. It was fixated on something obscure near the shed. The barking reached a crescendo as Harold, heart thumping in his aged chest, rounded the dilapidated structure. There, amid a tangle of discarded materials and twisted rebar, lay a small bundle, a ragged blanket, and within it, a vulnerable toddler, shivering and crying softly. The child, wrapped in a threadbare coat far too small for winter's chill, appeared abandoned and forgotten in this cold, barren place. Time seemed to halt. Harold's memory flashed to the anguished cries of children long lost, to the promises never kept. Without a second thought, he knelt beside the child, his aged hands trembling as he cradled the tiny, fragile being. The storm around him roared and rumbled. Yet inside that small, frightened heart lay the seed of hope that Harold now vowed to nurture. With the dog still standing sentinel, its barks now softened to a protective growl, Harold gathered the child carefully in his arms. His mind raced. He must call for help, arrange for the child's safety, but first he needed to ensure that the little one was warm and calm. The determined German shepherd bounded over, its large frame exuding both caution and care, standing guard. As Harold wrapped the child in his own worn jacket and pressed the child close to his chest. It was in that electric moment, caught between despair and wonder, that Harold felt the first stirrings of something he had almost forgotten, a bond that could bridge the gap between broken past and a chance for redemption. The dog, who had barked so passionately moments before, now lowered its head as if acknowledging that the task it was meant to perform had been fulfilled. In its gaze, Harold saw a glimmer of understanding, a silent pledge of loyalty. Without delay, Harold dialed the emergency services on his battered mobile phone. In the haze of the stormy night, help arrived swiftly. Flashing lights, voices of assurance, and the warm presence of rescuers who wrapped the child in blankets and took it away to safety. But amidst the chaos of rapid responses and anxious assurances, Harold's eyes never left the dog. That dog, now his unexpected savior, had become a symbol of the hope that perhaps after all these solitary years, new meaning could emerge from loss. In the days that followed, as the rescued toddler was safely reunited with a foster family, Harold found himself compelled to return to the spot where destiny had intertwined his fate with that of his newfound friend. The old German shepherd, whom Harold came to name Valor, had since followed him home. Though initially wild and wary, Valor grew to trust Harold's gentle touch and his soft, reassuring voice, his once feral gaze transformed into one of benevolence, an everlasting testament to the loyalty that had guided his every bark that night. Vala's presence injected life into Harold's weary existence. What began as an instinctive act of salvation evolved into a deep, unspoken companionship that slowly healed the old man's shattered heart. Each day, Harold would speak to Vala, as though to an old friend lost in the twilight of memory, a confidant who had shared the dark battlefields of loneliness. Together, they embarked on long walks through the town, often pausing to admire the glistening rain-washed streets or the way the winter light cast long shadows that danced on ancient brick walls. In the gentle cadence of Vala's padded footsteps and the quiet murmur of his beloved's voice, Harold rediscovered fragments of joy. There were moments, however, when the ghosts of his past would surge anew. The silent corridors of his modest home, lined with faded photographs of loved ones long gone, would sometimes echo with the grief of irreversible loss. On those nights, Vala would rest his head on Harold's knee, offering a wordless comfort that reached the depths of a wounded soul. The animal's soulful eyes mirrored Harold's own hidden sorrow, yet they also shone with the promise of resilience, a quiet strength born from shared endurance. One fateful afternoon, as a pallid winter sun struggled behind a curtain of heavy, grey clouds, Harold experienced a sudden, debilitating dizziness while preparing a simple meal. The room spun on its axis. A sharp pain clenched his chest in an all-too-familiar grip of terror. In that critical instant, as Harold clutched the edge of the table, Vala sprang into action. The loyal dog, sensing his master's distress, barked ferociously and darted toward the open door, his paws thundering against the cold tiled floor. Harold managed only a faint call for help before collapsing onto the floor. Vala's instincts, honed by a lifetime of understanding the unspoken language of loss and recovery, took over. With heart-pounding urgency, he raced out into the street, barking with such relentless intensity that it summoned the attention of a nearby passerby, a kindly woman who, alarmed by the barking, quickly dialed emergency services. The minutes that followed were a blur of swift paramedic intervention, the comforting hum of medical machines, and whispered reassurances in a language of quiet gratitude. In the sterile light of the hospital, Harold opened his eyes to see Vala lying faithfully. At his side, his muzzle pressed gently against Harold's hand. In that moment of profound vulnerability and relief, the bond between man and animal shone more brightly than any light, bridging the gap between mortal fragility and the indomitable power of loyalty. News of Vala's heroic intervention spread rapidly, carried on a viral video clip recorded by the startled bystander. The clip, capturing the valiant dog's tireless run through the rain and his desperate barks that had saved his master, struck a chord with viewers across the nation. As clips were shared and hashtags began to trend, strangers marveled at the story of an elderly man rescued by a stray, fiercely loyal dog, a story that transcended age, circumstance, and despair. Local media soon picked up the story, painting portraits of a once isolated man rediscovering hope and a wild soul transformed into a guardian angel, a symbol of second chances. Interviews, heartfelt letters, and community tributes poured in, each a testament to the power of redemption through unconditional love. Emboldened by this wave of support, Harold slowly began to rebuild his life. The outpouring of kindness from a once-forgotten community transformed his quiet existence into one filled with opportunities for connection. Neighbors, once distant and indifferent, now stopped to share warm greetings and invitations to local gatherings. Harold's humble home, once a monument to isolation, became a sanctuary of renewed purpose. Every morning, as the dew still glistened on the grass and the faint scent of winter pine drifted through the air, Harold and Vala would set out together on their daily walks. Along the winding paths of a reawakened town, they passed smiling faces, delicate blossoms beginning to break through the last remnants of frost, and storefronts that glowed softly in the early light, a living mosaic of community and compassion. Yet, life's journey remained unpredictable and bittersweet. Over time, Harold's health began to falter more frequently. The scars of a long and lonely existence, combined with years of neglecting his own needs, weighed heavily upon him. Still, Vala's steadfast companionship offered solace and strength. Every time the old man grew weak, every time the pain of loss threatened to overwhelm him, the faithful dog was there nuzzling his hand, licking his face in reassurance, or simply resting his head upon his lap as if to say, "I am here, you are not alone." In a final poignant act of love and protection, a day came when Harold, weakened by yet another bout of illness, found himself at the brink of despair. In the still, quiet hours before dawn, when the world was cloaked in shadow, a severe warning came in the form of a sudden, sharp pain. Harold lay in bed, unable to call out, his breath shallow and labored, the silence around him heavy with unspoken fears. And it was then that Valor, guided by a bond deeper than words, did what he had done before. With fierce determination, he bounded from the room and raced to the neighbor's house, his incessant barks piercing the hush of that pre-dawn gloom. Thanks to Valor's urgent plea, help arrived in time to save Harold from a tragedy that might have otherwise claimed him forever. That act, captured by a neighbor's smartphone, added another chapter to Valor's legacy, a final heroic display of loyalty that transcended every hardship. In the days following that rescue, as Harold slowly recovered in the gentle care of doctors and the relentless support of his community, his heart swelled with both gratitude and melancholy. He knew that his journey was nearing its quiet end, but also that the love he had rediscovered in the unlikeliest of places would live on. His transformation had been profound. From a man shrouded in isolation and loss, he had become a beacon of hope and resilience, forever changed by the loyalty of a stray dog who had become his family. The local community, moved by this incredible story of redemption and devotion, organized a celebration of Valor's heroism. At a town hall event, filled with tearful tributes and heartfelt speeches, Valor was honored with an award as a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, love could guide one toward salvation. As voices rose in gratitude and applause filled the air, Harold, despite his frailty, managed a small, proud smile. In his eyes shone the reflection of a life once barren, now enriched by the steadfast presence of a guardian who had loved him without reservation. Years passed. In a gentle, dignified rhythm, Harold's health waned as all mortal souls must, yet his spirit remained undimmed by the trials of his twilight years. In his final days, he was surrounded by tokens of the community's admiration, a memory board filled with photos of his and Valor's shared journey, letters from those he had inspired, and the soft, persistent reminders of hope that had been kindled on that fateful rainy night. And when Harold finally passed away, quietly in his sleep, Valor was there at his side, a silent, sorrowful witness to the end of a remarkable chapter. Harold was laid to rest in the town's small cemetery, a place of simple graves and tender remembrances. The town, having embraced his story with open arms, placed a beautiful handcrafted bench beside his final resting place, engraved with the words, "In loyalty and love, we find our home." It was a fitting tribute to a man who had been saved by compassion and whose legacy was forever intertwined with that of his beloved dog. Valor, though older and wearied by years of faithful service, continued to roam the cemetery, often seen lying quietly beneath the bench where Harold's memory lingered, a living, breathing symbol of hope, second chances, and enduring love. Local children learned to honor Harold's legacy by leaving small tokens of gratitude near the bench, bright wildflowers, hand-drawn pictures of a kind old man and his noble dog, and sometimes even a story spoken softly in the gentle twilight. The town, once indifferent and detached, had been transformed by the simple truth that in a world often filled with isolation and loss, even the smallest act of loyalty could spark a revolution of hope. In the quiet years that followed, Valor remained a fixture in the community, a gentle guardian whose presence brought comfort to all who knew his story. Neighbors, visitors, and even strangers from afar came to see the old dog who had once alerted the world to the beauty of second chances. And although Valor eventually passed into a peaceful sleep of eternal rest, his memory was preserved in every whispered homage, every story told by those touched by his unwavering devotion. Thus, the tale of Harold Finch and Valor, an aged man, rescued from the depths of isolation by the unexpected love of a stray German shepherd, became a beacon for many hearts. It was a story of redemption, of finding light in the shadows, and of the enduring power of loyalty that defies time and circumstance. In every quiet tear and every heartfelt smile, their journey resounded as a testament to the healing strength of compassion, reminding us all that love, once given freely, never truly fades. As the seasons turned and the town continued to flourish, with newfound warmth and connection, the legacy of Harold and Valor lived on, etched in stone, carried in memories, and celebrated in every small act of kindness that wove the tapestry of community life. Thank you for joining us on this journey of loss and renewal, a journey where second chances spark new beginnings and where the simple bonds of loyalty and love remind us that every ending can also herald a beautiful, hopeful start. If you believe in the power of compassion and the remarkable strength found in unexpected heroes, follow along and share in more stories that celebrate the enduring spirit of those who mend hearts and light paths even in the darkest of times.